Hello, everyone. This is Anthony with the Dragons of Victory. I've discussed the concept of the paradox of tolerance before, but I wanted to zero in on it here a bit more. And like all paradoxes, it can be a little mind bending at first, but this is actually a pretty simple concept. Actually, I think basically, I would hope we all want a tolerant society. We want a free and fair society where we disagree, we have our differences, but we respect the people around us and respect that their differences are an expression of their individual. The differences from us are an expression of their individuality, and that's a beautiful thing. We want people to be who they are or who they want to be, provided that that's uh, that who they want to be is would be harmonious for the rest of us, but it takes clearly a supreme level of narcissism to think that a world where everyone's values and viewpoints and beliefs are respected as much as possible, as much as reasonably can be, to think that's a bad thing. And just to be convinced that no, I've got all the answers. Everyone else who doesn't think exactly the way I do and doesn't subscribe to this narrow structure I've adopted, they're evil, stupid. It's not worth listening to their arguments against me. It's not worth considering their feelings and their opinions because they're just so wrong. They're just so much in the dark, and I'm so much in the light that I can impose my will. I can wield my ideology as a kind of weapon and by force basically impose that on the rest of society, whether they like it or not. And we see that play out throughout history and across the world. So the paradox of tolerance is that if you got a system set up to respect people's beliefs, tolerate people's beliefs, tolerate people's differences and whatnot, it's the goal. That's what we should be aiming for. But you got this group, like I described, that doesn't believe that doesn't respect that structure at all. That thinks that that's like a destructive structure or detrimental to society's good to not listen to me and just me, not listen to us and just us. If a system were to tolerate that too much more than they should, if they were to tolerate that idea, it would inevitably lead to the undoing of that tolerant society because the intolerant group would take it over and impose their will. So you have to, like in all things, nuance is beautiful. There's a balance. There's a yin and a yang. There's a back and forth. You have to find that. And that kind of mindset that eschews that and says, no, I'm all in on this and I'm locked and loaded. And look at the rest of the world not locked and loaded, not settled into this ideology of mine. We gotta take it over. We gotta impose our will on it. Um, Hopefully, you recognize that that's clearly a bad thing, because the narcissism is an inevitably destructive force. If a narcissistic entity perhaps is clever, they can maintain their own survival, and they can mitigate the destruction away from them, but they're just going to leave a trail of destruction in their wake no matter where they go. And so I've talked about the paradox of tolerance before, but I'm honing in on it now right here because I want to again sort of explain my position, explain where I'm coming from, explain what the whole Dragons of Victory endeavor is all about as best I can, because if I haven't said this before or made it as clear as I can, my heart is really not in this. What do I mean by that? The satisfaction I get or the on a visceral level, on a purely sort of like, uh, feeling of like personal satisfaction, I get very, very little from any of this. I do appreciate very much the comments that thank me for what I'm doing and say people saying I feel the same way. And I've gotten so much good from you guys that I really appreciate. But it's the internet, and I knew this was going to happen. But it's also been a fire hose of dog shit responses to you, and so, but my heart also isn't in it because I really, really believed this with all my heart, with all my soul. That's one of the comments in particular that, I've gotten a lot better at just sort of, all the fire hose of dog shit comments, just shrug them off. That's gotten a lot easier and easier for sure. But one that really kind of still sticks in my craw a little bit is the claim that I never believed this, and that I know it's all true. I know that traditional Catholicism is really true, and that's I I tried so long. I tried so hard to, even after I left traditional Catholicism, I didn't talk about really at all my disagreements with it, and I just tried to focus on me being a mainstream Catholic, but that didn't work out. Simply because I got to the point where I couldn't make it match with reality, and I couldn't fit all the pieces together, and I knew that I couldn't live with integrity if I was living. I'd be living a lie. To continue to be Catholic, and this was my personal journey. And again, any mainstream Catholic who agrees with what I'm saying about the traditional Catholic movement is fully on board with the Dragons of Victory, as far as I'm concerned. And I've talked to a lot of mainstream Catholics, former traditionalists and not, who have liked what I'm doing. So, but nevertheless, I get I also get the response that, why can't you just leave traditional Catholicism alone? Why do you have to constantly shit on these people, this organization? Why can't you just, be tolerant, right? Let people have their little belief systems that give them peace, that anchor them, and allow everyone else to adopt that as they see it, and just leave them be. That's how you should. That's what you should do. And I so on that's my heart is so with that idea, is so um on board with that. And that's why I even say in my first Dragons of Victory video, this is I want this to be a temporary stage of my life. It I don't well, I'm not going to say I don't like this at all, doing the Dragons of Victory, saying these things. I've definitely had a lot of really, really affirming experiences throughout all this, that and encountered a lot of great people. But I am a lover, not a fighter. And what happened to me growing up in the traditional Catholic culture is that I was forbidden to be a lover and forced to be a fighter. And like the priest who hurt me, the guy who Wolf, who was in charge of the whole culture, he what I've talked about, what I've honed in on, the the sexual stuff, that was kind of the worst uh, aspect of my interactions with him. But that was really kind of, I wouldn't say it was the tip of the iceberg, it was the base of the iceberg, but there was so much more to the iceberg. There was constant anger from him, and then tears, just this emotional dysregulation that you're constantly being exposed to, constantly predicting basically the upcoming apocalypse, constantly saying that a concentration style, seriously, a concentration style Auschwitz kind of roundup of all of us by the mainstream culture. This is when Obama was president. That's imminent. That's right around the corner. And with for someone who was as anxious as I was before, and still am, this was 4 years of gasoline on a flame for me, of being convinced basically that me and people in my faith and in my community were about to be in Auschwitz essentially because the government was going to like crack down and on faithful Catholics is what they said. None of that crap happened, but he would constantly say it was a certainty. It, and this was and he would even give it sort of a time frame like within like very soon like five. I'm not gonna I've been avoiding as hard as I can going through his sermons again. I've really since I made that one video where I read the letter, I've really resisted listening to him, so I'm not going to try and pull up a clip where he gives a time frame. But people who uh, people who were around him and around me at that time have agreed with that it was an imminent thing he was predicting. And I know, and after I spoke out against him, starting the whole Dragons of Victory project focused on him, the bad things he did. I've been also getting the response or the commentary from people like, okay, like, yeah, he was bad. Many people in my old community have told that, like, we agree that he was bad, but he was a one-off kind of thing, and that is so. I wish I could believe that, but I know simply know that's not true. I know that there was a reason he was so popular because he was like the perfect product of the traditional Catholic kind of mindset and aims, you know. And there's a I've and in many ways, as awful as all this was, hearing from people who grew up in SSPX chapels or Sedevacantist chapels, I realized with a degree of horror that I kind of, in some ways, I got off easy. I didn't have it nearly as bad as some of these other kids I've heard from people in trad recovery, the group trad recovery, right, and all these other people I'm constantly like highlighting, like people telling you should listen to trad recovery, Kevin, Cade, all Callan, all these people. I always in my videos try to bring their names up to make it not about me. I said in the first Dragons of Victory video, and the reason I didn't name this channel just my name is it's not. I don't want this to be about me because again, my heart's not in it. Um, and I was almost dragged kicking and screaming into not really, but like there's a great deal of reluctance in this whole project. But the reason I keep this up for as long as I will is I am a very deep, strong believer in tolerance, in peace, in allowing people to live their lives, allowing people to experience things that they feel are anchor them and give them the most amount of peace. Because for me personally, with the amount of anxiety and fear that I live with a lot, I know how precious that is, and I know how desperation is I think one of those powerful forces out there, and you become more and more desperate in life the less peace you have and the less anchors you have. And so it just the if the paradox of tolerance, if you accept that framework and for a moment here, and if traditional Catholics were taught were like allowed to impose to have their way and tolerate it, I guess, to the degree that that their social reign of Christ the King they were actually able to make happen, then the tolerant society would go away, and you'd have a North Korea type situation. You'd have an authoritarian hellscape where the individual, where there is no individual dignity, which is hell on earth, I would say. And so I said before also that logically, rationally speaking, I am I don't I don't think the Vatican II is going to be undone by Rome in any of our lifetimes who are alive right now. So there's really no legitimate concern on my part that the traditional Catholic movement will actually impose what they call the social reign of Christ the King, because it's a whole framework based on magical thinking, and there's such a disorganized, chaotic infighting mess. The whole trad the infighting is legitimately crazy the more you think about it, and especially when you contrast that to their demands for society when they can't get their own household or their own inner structure together. It gets, when you really step back and think about like the odds, the practicality of traditional Catholicism achieving their goals, it's pretty laughable and it's pretty ridiculous. And I'm not worried about that at all. But I am worried about people who are in my situation who weren't, sounds weird to say, but in some ways weren't as lucky as me in terms of I was associated with the FSSP group that still tries to hold on to an official ties with Rome, with the mainstream Catholic Church, which isn't perfect, isn't great in a lot of ways, but is especially under Francis and leaders like him, is an organization worth leaving alone for the most part. But traditional Catholicism is really not, and it's a structure and it's a system, it's a belief set that needs to be challenged and fought against, and because it's a culture that is obsessed with political dominance. I got responses earlier from a video where I was talking with maybe Kevin or Kate or someone, and the comments were like, "Don't quit bringing politics into this," and it's like I would love to, and I try to avoid that stuff as much as possible here, but traditional Catholics definitely don't. They're uploading sermons, listening to sermons, saying on podcasts. It's across the board almost political commentary, because they're looking at societal ills, social ills, and pointing at them and saying, "Look at society screwing up and not doing what we're doing," and whereas meanwhile, back in their world, they'll what you said something that is slightly off my interpretation of Canon 5.4, or you have a different interpretation of this Pope, and it's on and on, infighting to a ridiculous farcical degree, and that is awful to have your brain develop in. It's just awful. And I have healed so much. I have been so grateful in many ways, the way this whole project has turned out. In many ways, it's turned out, just for me personally, so much better than it could have. And I just have so much more peace, so much more hope, and so much more confidence in myself for what lies ahead of me for the rest of my life, since I've started speaking out and since I've made my feelings clear. But at the same time, I don't want to be, I don't want unnecessary collateral damage. I don't want to attack people who don't deserve to be attacked. And there are many people, traditional Catholics individually, families, whatever, individual people who attend traditional Catholic parishes who are not worthy as individuals of any derision or going after them, because in their minds this is just another one of the many, options there are out there. Not that they don't believe it's true, but it's like there are many people within traditional Catholicism who, because they joined it as adults, it's a lot easier for them to dismiss or just not think about the crazy stuff, and to just sort of, get enmeshed in the community, which is beautiful, which is how these things should work. But they're also listening to all these priests, influencers, podcasts who are obsessed with the militant, the idea of the church militant, and this political goal, and this vision for society that is authoritarian and wrong. So that's why I go after traditional Catholicism. Not that I'm actually concerned that they're going to achieve that, but I'm concerned for what it can do to someone being brought up in an environment like that. Um, and there's so many other harms that are more subtle and more nuanced than that, that damage you in black and not in black and white ways, and ways that require sort of unpacking and stuff. And yeah, one reason among many this whole endeavor is tough for me is constantly remembering all that stuff. But I've got so much better in at compartmentalizing it and seeing it for what it was, and separating the event from the emotional memory. And I want other people out there to have the same experience of that, to have that same empowering feeling. So, um, basically, point here: um, we need we need to be tolerant. We need to be accepting of the differences of others. But the paradox of tolerance is an important thing to remember in that whole equation and that whole calculation there. Um, because if you're tolerating the intolerant, and you're tolerating them too much, you'll lose your tolerant society. So thank you for listening, and subscribe, like, all that stuff, and I hope you fly away to victory. Take care.